שמע שיר חדש ובנענע.
All right, today is Yom Sheni of Parshas Vayeishev. I'm a little under the weather, so it might be a somewhat abbreviated shir today. I do want to cover some important points. Let's delve right in. We end at the end of Parshas, last week's Parsha. We saw the yishuv, the exponential growth of Esav and his alufim, the Mishpachos Ham. The Torah curiously gives us a tremendous amount of detail about Esav's offspring. Why would this interest us? Why is this something that's important? Even if it is accurate and true, of course, but why? Why would this information important to us? So I think the premise is that there's information about Esav because the dealing with Esav is not going to turn the page on Parshas Vayishlach and all of a sudden Esav disappears from the scene, and now we're talking about Yosef and his brothers. Does Esav really disappear after all? Or is there something more going on behind the surface? So let's just show how in the story of, this is like Esav Yosef. What are the many connections between Esav and Yosef, and why are they important? And what does that have to do with the sale of Yosef? And what's that all about? Okay, so let's see. First connection is when Yaacov comes to bow down in front of Esav, and he sets up his wives. As we said last week, I don't believe that he needed to present his camp separately in separate camps. They did it one after the other. It wasn't two camps necessarily, it was one after the other, because once Yaakov Avinu had experienced the victory over the Malach, and, according to Chazal, received his brachos, meaning that the Malach was moda on the brachos, and Esav himself later was moda on the brachos, just like it was in that scene, because he says, Yi lach asher lach, let what's yours be what's yours, and Chazal say at that point, he admitted that Yaakov was the rightful owner of the brachos of Yitzchak, even though it was taken in a way which he objected to. So he no longer was afraid of Esav's mortal capacity at that point, and rather had shifted from Yaakov to Yisrael. And once you shift, explained last week, it's a different dynamic. It was interesting. Rabbi Shmuel Brazil was here this past Shabbos, and he spoke at Eish Kodesh, and he noted that the Malach only says Lo Yikare Od Shimcha Yisrael. He doesn't keep Yaakov in the balance. Whereas when Akash Baruch Hu speaks to Yaakov, he says to him Shimcha Yaakov, and then he goes on to explain why he's adding him the name Yisrael. So it seems like the Malach of Esav, the Satan, was really trying to say the following: okay, Jewish people, you win. You're getting Eretz Yisrael. It's going to be your Yerusha. However, there's a risk involved. And that risk is, if you fall down from the lofty level of Yisrael, which we've explained incorporates all of the avos, Yisrael, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Sin is Sarah, Reish is Rachel, Rivka, Aleph is Avram, Lamed is Leah. It's the composite avos. Yaakov is the linchpin. He's the Makabeh Patish. He's the thing that consolidates all of the avos into one thing, which is why he's called Bechir Sheba Avos. And he's able to construct an entire Bnei Yisrael, 12 tribes. Okay? And the big problem that Yaakov confronted was not merely that he had he had to meet Esav on his way back into Eretz Yisrael. That was only the very tip of the iceberg. If we really want to understand this better, we have to go back a little bit and see, and this is our premise, that Yosef and Esav are intertwined in ways which are numerous. So that even the sale of Yosef, which is one of the two primary sins of Klal Yisrael of all time, the other one being Cheda Ego, and even Cheda Ego, are seriously intertwined with Yosef, and Yosef is always intertwined with Esav. And what is the significance of that? Because the ongoing concern of as Yaacov dreamt, the long duration of Golus. Esav is not a one and out kind of situation. Parshas was kind of one and out. They had us for 70 years, but there's something much deeper. When the non-Jews when the non-Jews conquer Am Yisrael, like Nebuchadnezzar, or the Koresh, right? Or even Yavan, Alexander the Great, and so on. Those are external threats. But Esav is an internal threat. What I mean to say that there is an ongoing problem that Esav creates that we must always address, and that's perhaps why the Gullus of Rome, which we say is Esav extrapolated to the religion of Christianity, as the Ramban and others explain, is such an enduring struggle. Right? Well, let's get to the bottom of it a little bit. First of all, we know that Yaakov was struck by the Malach of Esav in the Gid HaNoshe. What is the Gid HaNoshe? And Al-Kain Lo Yochlu, Klal Yisrael should not eat the Gid HaNoshe. What do you want to eat? It's a piece of string. I was involved in my Kehillah in Oceanside. We had a kosher butcher, and I brought in an expert from the OU to teach us to do trabering. Trabering means to remove the Gid HaNoshe and the fats that are related to it. And that was an expertise. And we had it in our store. Most places, the big ones like Satmar, etc., they don't even bother with it. They just sell that part to non-Jews. But the smaller providers don't want to lose all that schoira. So you need a traberer. You need somebody who can actually remove. The gid is nothing other than an elastic string. And the Gemara in Chulin says it has no taste. It has no taste, but nevertheless, it's usher to eat. And the question is, what is that all about? So there are several interpretations of what the Gid HaNoshe means and why it's so significant. As you may recall, I quoted the Rambam, Perek Tes Hilchos Malachim, that the evolution of mitzvos included the following: the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Avram does the 8th mitzvah, which is Milah, plus he teaches us Shacharis. Yitzhak does the 9th mitzvah, which is Meiser, giving tzedakah 1/10 of all your produce and all your gains. And that's the mitzvah that Yitzhak adds. But the mitzvah that Yaakov adds is Gid HaNoshe, which is actually a lav. The first two are performance. Perform a bris milah, give Meiser. But the Gid HaNoshe is not that. It's just something that we avoid and that we remember our vulnerability. As it says that Yaakov was Soleya al Yerecho. Let me share this with you. This is so fundamentally important. We have to understand that this color is behind the scenes, all of the interactions of Yosef and his brothers and anything that would be in the future about Yosef, all the way till Mashiach ben Yosef. The shadow of Esav, and that would be a good name for this year. The shadow of Esav is always lurking, okay? And we have to be aware of it. Okay, so what happens? So when Yaakov was alone, the Malach appears to him by Yalin Sham B'Laylahu. He's in the camp, crosses all of his belongings and his wives, goes back for Pachim Katanim, which is a reference to Hanukkah. As we know, it's another point of Esav's shadow. And in the confrontation with Esav, Hanukkah is related to the confrontation with Esav. How? Okay. Yaakov goes back for the fuel that he would need, which is part of that fight and flight. So, Vayivasa Yaakov levada vayei ish imo adalos hashaka. Vayei is two perushim. Either it means that they wrestled, or it means that they kicked the dirt up to Shemayim, and they were wrestling on the ground so that the afar went up to Shemayim. Now, the afar was one of the symbols of the numeric multitude of Klal Yisrael. That the zera of Yaakov would be like afar, we like the sands of the sea, and it is really all about the problems with genealogy. It's all about the continuity and the children, the ability to transmit the package that Yaakov created, which was this abstract known as Yisroel. All Jewish souls, according to the Zohar Kadosh, are kept in a reservoir known as Knesset Yisroel. It's the aggregate souls of the Jewish people, which is also associated with the Shekhinah. So this entity, which is everything that we want and Hashem wants to be brought to this world without interference, okay? This is the problem of the Gid HaNasha, because the Gid HaNasha means, Nasha on one hand means the ability to produce children. Some say it was actually the reproductive organs. That's what it means. But we know halachically it's also the kaf yirecho. It's got to be the back sinew. And that's about legs, having legs. Legs means what? You can stand on your own 2 feet. You have to, if you cannot stand up, you cannot exert your existence on your environment. And what Klal Yisrael desperately needs is 2 things. Children, okay, who can be taught the Torah, be transmitted all of the elements of the wisdom of Torah, and that are associated with their very souls. I saw a beautiful thing from the Yom Yom, from the Chabad Yom Yom, which they read was the notebook of the Frierdiker Rabbi. He wrote little notes to himself, and they published it. One of the first things the Lubavitch Rebbe did when he became Rebbe in like 1951, that published his father's little notebook, Yoman. It was a calendar. So he said that when you understand that the Jewish soul is part of Hashem, which is completely without any measure or limitation, then, and when you look at another Jew, that's what you're looking at. It's not the same when you look at other creatures or other parts of or even other parts of humanity. Partially it's there, but here is a much exaggerated degree that the neshamas of Klal Yisrael are so bound in inherently to Torah, and so bound in inherently to Eretz Yisrael, and so bound in integrally to Akash Baruch Hu, that when you look at another Jew, what you're really seeing is eternity. And that's going to go a long way to solve the problem of sinas china. The way that we've been guided by deducing that our biggest problem, and it was actually a mitzvah, a restriction on Yaakov, saying, Yaakov, your mission is to bring the Shekhinah to the earth. You've cemented and completed the Yisrael. You've erected. You've managed to build this entity called Klal Yisrael in its nascent form. And the big problem you're going to have is Gid HaNasha. What does that mean? Children and finances and the money to support them. Because if you're not financially independent, if you can't stand on your own 2 feet, say this guy says, Chazal tell us that you have money, it gives a raglayim l'adam. You're a person, you're standing. The person has to stand. We don't crawl on all fours. You have to stand. Stand means you need strong foundations. And the foundations require chinuch of the children and the money to support the creation of Jewish families. That's it. Okay? Torah is an ongoing challenge. It's not, oh yeah, I learned Torah, I'm okay, great, I got a great house, got nice kids, okay. No. Now, what are you going to do for the next generation? The grandfather is obligated al pi halacha to teach their son Torah just as a failsafe in case the father doesn't do it or chooses not to do it or cannot do it, doesn't have the means to do it. The grandfather is supposed to step in and ensure that there be another generation to carry forward. This is where Esav's shadow lurks. Esav's shadow is any time that in our history or the Jewish experience and trying to just live as Jews and establish Makomei Torah wherever they might be in the world, the challenge you're going to have is, are the children going to be allowed to learn Torah? And do the Jews have the resources to establish their yeshivos, to establish their parnasa, and to support Torah? Right? Or are the yeshivas going to empty out because everybody has to go to work, or because there's conscription to this army or that army? What will be the future of Knesset Yisrael is the eternal challenge of Yaakov Avinu. Okay, that's it. So now what happens is we get an important message about it, though, almost immediately afterwards. Whereas the fight is only through the night. When the dawn arises, Ad Alos HaShachar, the battle ends. In other words, the primary place that this battle will happen is in the Laila. In the Laila, which means when we are in, like Klal Yisrael's Nimshal Levana, when we are, eclipsing, when we are vanishing. Today's there was a full moon. That full moon represents Klal Yisrael in all its splendor. That's why Pesach is on the 15th of the month. That's why Sukkot is on the 15th of the month. It's when Klal Yisrael is in its full force. But Yaakov is testimony to the fact that we will go through galut stages in which things will be very dark. Remember, Elie Wiesel wrote his slim volume called Night, which the New York Times back in the day said it's a slim volume filled with enormous terror. It was terror. But he was able to describe in his eloquent way, and I did know Elie Wiesel pretty well, just a magnificent, regal Jew who so deeply rooted in his love for his father and for Hasidus and for everything, and yet so completely absorbed into the secular and other worlds and French culture and everything else and American culture. Just really like a Yaakov Avinu kind of figure. And he wrote a book called Night, because night is the time where this avak is darkness. It is the sands that cover the sun. You can't see it. And at that point, the pasuk says, "Vayizrach lo hashemesh kasher avra al Penuel." Penuel was the place where he encountered the Malach. V'hu tzoleya al Yerecho. Yaakov is limping on his thigh, and always, right? If you remember from the brachos of Avraham Avinu, Yerecho is a reference to the Makom Mila. Simna yadcha tachas Yerechi, right? So he's tzoleya al Yerecho. There's a limp. There's a reduction, a cutting away. Like a tzela is a rib. It's exposed, right? Ribs are independent pieces that come out of the skeleton. Soleya al Yerecho, which means that it's Chava was Vayeishev Hatzela, right? Vayeishev Hatzela. That's Chava. So you have two references here. Yerecho and Sela is really about Adam Chava, the purpose of the world, Klal Yisrael, making it. Tzalei Arecho, this is going to happen. But the Shemesh is going to come out. And when the Shemesh comes out, okay, the Hu Tzalei Arecho, and then what happens? Is he still limping? Al Kain lo yochlu b'nei Yisrael said get anoshe asher al kaf hayerech ad hayom hazeh ki naga b'kaf yerech Yaacov b'gid hanoshe. Says Rashi, quoting first of all the Gemara in Sanhedrin Sadiq K. Here's what it says: Vayizrach lo hashemesh, says the Med Braces Rabbah Ein Ches. Vayizrach lo litzarcho, the sun rose for him. Notice Zerach. Where do you find the name Zerach? Where is Zerach? Peretz, Zerach. These are names of the kings of Yehuda. Vayizrach lo litzarcho, the sun comes out. There are posts as tzilaso, to close his rib from its wound. K'madatem, it says in Malachi Gimel Perkov, Shemesh tzedakah umarbeh biknafeha. What does that mean? A son of righteousness or of tzedek or of tzedakah umarpeh, and it's going to heal with its wings, as if the sun has wings that will embrace you in its warmth and bring about refuah shalema. Now, continues the Medrash. The same hours that Hashem took away from the day to make him stay at the place where he would have his dream on his way to Lavan. Mihira lizroch bishvilo, says the Gemara Sanhedrin and Parshas Rabbah. These hours come back. So let's analyze this for a second. There is an important message here. Let's really understand. Let's go back to Yaakov's journey. I'm going to just recap. We touched upon this previously, but it's just like a chazara because it's so important. Remember, Yaakov's journey includes the dream of the four Golios, correct? Especially, again, his encounter with Esav. And on his way out of Eretz Yisrael to confront Lavan and have his family, he's given this information. And the sun was forced to set on him. But what exactly happened? So the Medrash says, Yaakov sets out from Beersheba. Beersheba is the place of Avram and Yitzchak. It's the southernmost boundary of Eretz Yisrael. It's the end of Eretz Yisrael. It's its intersect with Eretz Plishtim and Chutz La'aretz, and is Eretz Yisrael, but not to the extent that Beersheba is, as we mentioned previously. And then Mitzrayim is after. So from the very, very base, from the bottom, Yaakov starts moving north, okay? Northeast. And the midpoint of the ladder is Yerushalayim. The top point of the ladder is Beit El, otherwise known as Shechem. Where, what? Okay, Shechem is what? Shechem is exactly the piece of territory where Yosef HaTzadik himself is buried, okay? So the end of the ladder, which incorporates the last Galut, finds its termination in the city of Shechem. And who was given the city of Shechem as an inheritance? Yosef. Why? Because it says that Yaakov won it from the Shechem and his Hamor and all those people through the hands of Shimon Belevi, Becharbi or Bekashti, with my sword and with my bow. Now let's go slowly here. There's a lot of important information here. Just go slow. First of all, the Medrash says that Yaakov had kvitzas haderech. He had, what do you call that? Spontaneous travel, a warp in time. He was able to cover distance in a tiny bit of time, and he finds himself already in Chutz La'aretz. Turns around, says, I got to go back and daven. And then there's a second kvitzas haderech. But this time, as we mentioned, Hashem does a strange thing. He takes Har Moriah, lifts it up, brings it all the way up to Beit El, and then allows Yaakov to instantaneously travel to Beit El. As if to say, don't bother coming to Yerushalayim. You don't have to come back so far. I'll make it easier for you. But wait, there's no difficulty here. We're traveling in instantaneous fashion. Yaakov could easily have just gone back to the real place, which is Yerushalayim. Why did Hashem bring Jerusalem to Beit El? It's very strange. And that's the area of Shechem. So what's the message? The message is, and over there is where Yaakov, okay? It's over there where Yaakov is forced to stop because of nightfall, these hours that we're talking about, right here in this medrash, about Shemesh Stako, Marbi B'Knafea, Pasuk from Malachi, says that hours were taken away from the day and returned to Yaakov after the encounter with Esav to heal his wound of the Gid Anasha, right? So it's the same hours prior to the dream that Yaakov is stuck, realizes he has to create a new tefillah called Arvis, and yet it's not quite Yerushalayim. It's Yerushalayim transposed onto Beit El. Why? Why all these complications? Keep it simple. Okay, so I believe what this is showing is that Yaakov's dream about the conquest of Eretz Yisrael begins with the territory of Yosef, with the city of Shechem, and with Yosef, Mashiach ben Yosef. It is a part of Yerushalayim because Mishkan Shiloh came in to Eretz Yisrael for the very first time right there. Okay? They went first Gilgal, they went up to Har Grizim and Har Eval, all right? And Mishkan Shiloh was erected there. Mishkan Shiloh was the taking of the actual Mishkan and putting it on a firmer foundation. Okay? So it was Yehoshua, a descendant of Yosef, who will actually lead them back out of Golus into Eretz Yisrael and establish the first foundation, which is the Mishkan all the way up north. But that's only a long preparation. It took 400 plus years till Mishkan Shiloh was 369 years. And then we first enter the period of Shaul HaMelech, who was also from the children of Rachel. And then finally we get to David HaMelech, the king of Yehuda from Hebron, and he ends up in Yerushalayim. So the big part of the return from Golus, the major part of Golus, is about entering through the area of Yosef, Shechem, and that's considered step one to building a mikdash. No, it's really, in its essence, that place wasn't only Beit El, it was also Yerushalayim, to show that as we move further and further away from Yerushalayim, we can still take Yerushalayim with us like a Mishkan and plant it there until we're ready to come back to Yerushalayim, where we'll have a permanent home. We know there's a law of the Bamos. Bamos meant you could sacrifice on a personal Mizbeach as long as it wasn't a permanent base. Mishkan Shiloh, 369 years, you couldn't bring your own backyard carbon. No, and because there was an established place. It was Binyan Risho. Bonagid, it was like a first Ki'ilu Beis HaMikdash. And there's a lot to be said about that. But let's move on. So then, those same hours that had to do with Yaakov's experience of Beit El and his dream and everything else are the same hours that come back when he enters Eretz Yisrael again and survives the encounter with Esav and then moves forward. Okay, those hours of Shemesh Staka Umarpeh B'Knafeha are actually what heals him from this danger, this mortal danger. Okay, Gid Anasha is a mortal danger. If you can be alive but without your children, without any money, those are two things that Chazal tell us. You're doma lemeis. A person who doesn't have children is doma lemeis. A person who doesn't have money is doma lemeis. Okay, because they can't really do anything. They're just bound, and there's no future. There's no movement. There's nothing going forward. So that is the danger. And the Shemesh Tzedakah, Okay, you ready? The tzedakah repairs the issue of not having funds. Shemer tzedakah. There'll be people who provide the funds. All right. And as far as the issue of children goes, marpeh biknafeha, a mother bird carries her little children on her wings. Right? The eagle places her baby eagle on her wings. That addresses the issue of motherly protection, which means children. A Yiddish mama raising children. Shemet tzedakah. First, we restore the funding, and then we can build the families. That's always how it will be. It's a never-ending message, and it's the background of everything that will ever go on. The person, the single individual who is tasked with making sure that Yaakov's experience of Shemesh Stako, Marp Kanafea, is Mitkashem, is Yosef. Yosef is the one who has to provide two things. He has to provide the resources, i.e. the food, the clothing, the shelter. And he also has to provide an environment in which Jewish children can be raised safely. Doesn't he exactly do that? Yosef HaMashbir. So Yaakov is very clear that as far as he's concerned, the most important of his children is clearly Yosef. There's nothing to talk about. And that's why he makes him a Ben Sekunim. And that's why he's mitzapeh to see that Yosef's dreams, which is in this week's Parsha already, mitzapeh is waiting to see them come true. Because Yaakov knows, as was based on his personal experience and his nevuah with Hashem and his transfer of his name from Yaakov to Yisrael, that there's one key figure that's going to help do this, and that's Yosef. Now let's understand. Yosef's relationship to Esav is what? Yosef steps in and takes the role of Esav. He is Esav's substitute. Because Esav was supposed to be one of the avos. There was going to be 4 avos and four imos, right? Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Esav. That was the plan. But then Esav, unfortunately, succumbs to the Yetzer Hara, to the Satan, and becomes exactly the enemy of this enterprise, at least for the time being. And Yosef has to step into that role. And I want to show you something. That first of all, for example, the Medrash says that Yaakov wanted to go back to Eretz Yisrael with 11 children. And Rachel was already pregnant with the 12th. Why? You couldn't wait a few minutes until the baby's born? I mean, seriously. How many was going to make a few months difference? Why did Yaakov make haste? Well, his wife is pregnant, for goodness sake, and run back to Eretz Yisrael because Yosef was born. Once Yosef was born, and in this world, the missing piece that he in his own life was taught would be his primary nemesis problem, dilemma, has been solved. Because there's now a person who will step into the Shemesh Staka, Marpeh B'Kanafea. He'll provide, Kanaf is providing protection, security, and resources, Staka. And that's what Esav's job was originally. He was supposed to be the mashbir of Yaakov. Yaakov would have been the Kohen, the Lomed Torah, the person sitting in yeshiva, the person who's lifelong learner of Torah, and Esav would be the balabos. Esav would be the one who would respect and love his brother, support him, give money to the yeshiva, give money to the kollel, build Batei Knesiot, Batei Medrashot, build mikvahs and everything else that Klal Yisrael needs. And that would be it. But Yaakov had to mipatzel himself. He had to divide himself and struggle that he should supply all of that himself. He bifurcated himself. He actually had to, it's not a clone exactly. It's a division of self, and a division of self is always painful. Very hard to be a divided person. It's very hard to be into. This is why I believe the situation we find ourselves here in Eretz Yisrael, which is so acute and so painful, is that, there's this incredible wars going on all around us. We have to take a second to thank Hashem for the miraculous flow of Damasek, as we said last time. Damasek is the same letters as Mikdash. It's Hayinu Kacholmim. We're like in shock. Hayinu Kacholmim. And now something has happened that the world has seen. Our Hezbollah fall, Hamas basically fall, except for their hostages. That's the only thing that they have. And then now Bashar Assad fall. That means that other countries could fall quickly, instantaneously. And that would include Iran. People now in the world, and the people in Iran, their appetites have been whet. They said, it'll never happen. We'll never get rid of the Revolutionary Guards are too strong. Well, meanwhile, they've been taking a beating everywhere, from Lebanon to Syria to Iraq, and even in Iran itself. And they've been victims of assassinations over this last several months. They have been tormented. And Hashem additionally took their great president, Raisi, out of the sky. Raisi, I say. Hashem said, I see what's going on with you and what these people are trying to do to you. Raisi, I'll clip him. I'll send his plane, his helicopter down, 1, 2, 3. And then the Biparim. And then, it's an all-out assault on the Iran Revolutionary Guard's powers and the powers of its proxies. What next? Just like Haman had a very quick rise and downfall, perhaps we're really at the door, and it's the talk of the world. Iran's going to fall. Khomeini's going to fall. They're going to fall. They're going to fall. Rational people say, what's going to take for that to happen? But now, all of a sudden, we have evidence. It could happen. It can happen. And it certainly should happen. But halavai, we should be zocheh. But it's already out there. It's already out there, which is incredible. Not all happened this year. All happened this year, Chasdei Hashem, in the merit of those martyrs who died on October 7th, and all the others who died, the Kedoshim and the Tahirim, and the soldiers and everybody else, and all the other karbanos that Hashem was forced to offer the Satan, so that this great good could progress for Klal Yisrael. And it ain't over yet. But this is the Yaacov Yosef connection. Now I mentioned that the first chief rabbi of America was known as Yaacov Yosef. His name was Yaacov Yosef, Rabbi Jacob Joseph. And he came to America in the 1880s, and he was the first and only chief rabbi of New York, of America really, but certainly of New York. He suffered a miserable fate. First of all, he only went to America because he had suffered great financial reversal. That was the first sign. His Shemesh Stucco had a problem, a big problem. He didn't have money, and he had to go take a job so that they would pay out his debts. But oh boy, did he suffer. Because he tried. Well, first of all, he's a magnificent Gadol, Baal Darshan. The only other candidate, they considered other candidates, including the Malbim, believe it or not. Malbim would have been an interesting choice. But Yaakov Yosef had this problem. He had tremendous chovos. The Shemesh Stucco was already weak by him. And then later, the Kanafayim were taken away from him, his protections by the Balabatim. He tried to raise kashrus. He instituted that there should be a penny tax to pay the mashkichim to do a proper job for kashrus in America, where everybody thought that I did it back in Europe, I know what to do, leave me alone. And they might Who knows what level of Yirat Shamayim they were on? Who knows what level of even Shmiras Mitzvos they were on? But they said, yeah, I'm a butcher. My family was butchers. I'm going to be a butcher. And because of that, he was subject to tremendous attacks, not only from butchers, but from the Maskilim, who, were relentlessly critical of him. And he ended up having a stroke and forgetting all of his learning. And the reason why he had a stroke was because came the day that one of his antagonists hung a pig outside of his butcher store and said, "Kashrus by the chief rabbi." And that was the last straw. When he saw that pig hanging with his name attached to it, he had a stroke. He never recovered. There's a lot of good that came out of that, but he was clearly the carbon to Esav, the carbon to the assimilation, to the Shemesh Staka, to establish Torah, to establish yeshivas, to establish Parnasa in Eretz Yisrael. It was his death and his suffering, and even his funeral in 1902, that saw the turning point of Yiddishkeit really starting to take root in America, to the level that could then produce B'nai Torah and yeshivos that were like the days of Europe. Up until that point, very few. There was the original Eitz Chaim Yeshiva, which became Yeshiva University eventually, almost nothing. But then right after he died, the Rabbi Jacob Joseph Yeshiva was founded by Rabbi Andron and by Olfa the boss. And his death was the beginning of Shemesh Staka Umarpeh B'Knafea in America. Then people started to give money for yeshivas and started to from Kite. It took a while, and of course, when you got into after World War One, picked up steam. Lots of people came from Europe. Rosh yeshivas began to come, and then of course, post World War II, we're in the 40s already, and then you had the influx of the great Rebbes and the great Rosh yeshivas, including Rabbi Soloveitchik, including Rav Cutler, including all those who really contributed greatly to the maturation of the Knafayim. They nurtured, they literally grew Torah, like you were watching an egg in the nest until it could fly and have its own wings. It's Yaacov Yosef. How ironic that it's a kedai to read the history. Perhaps I'll give a separate shiur on it, just about that story, which is one of the most heartbreaking stories, but also shows you the glimmer of hope that always exists, that even if Klal Yisrael's in full eclipse, the rebuilding is just around the corner. When we hit bottom, that's when things start to brighten. Okay? So I'm going to show you just one more couple of things here about the entrenchment, just how powerful this problem is for Yaakov, that it defines his very essence. And that is what we will see in these next couple of weeks, Parshas, of the fact that Binyamin becomes embroiled as a son of Rachel in this tug of war, and why the brothers viewed Yosef as an Esav. They said, you're like an Esav. You don't belong here, right? The major machlokas between Yosef and his brothers, Mergish tells us on things like Gid HaNosha, and things on, Gid HaNosha is one of them right there. And another one is Shchita, and having wives that were not Jewish or that they made for themselves using Shemos HaKadoshim. And what was the problem? The other brothers from Leah said, we're Jews. We made it. We are Yisroel. Don't you get it? We are the 12 tribes, or whatever tribes we are, right? And treat us as we've arrived already as Jews. We're Jewish. No. You're going to have to go through a whole process of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of the Shibud of 400 years. And then out of that kiln of fire will come Klal Yisrael, purified by virtue of its suffering and its resilience, and giving them the koichas to last for the remainder of history. So Yosef said, no, we're still B'nai Noach. This isn't over yet. The 12 tribes could come out of any one of us. In fact, Binyamin had 10 sons, named them all after Yosef. Theoretically, that could have been Klal Yisrael. Take Yosef and Binyamin, and between the two of them, you got the 10 sons over there. You got Ephraim and Manasseh and Binyamin. Got 12 tribes. Let's move on. And therefore, the halachic debate between them, as many Mepharshim explain, is that when you shecht an animal and cut both the windpipe and the food pipe, the kana and veshet, majority of both, it's kosher, okay? But if it's still twitching, it's still technically alive, right? But it's not halachically alive. This, by the way, has huge implications regarding brain death definitions and taking people off respirators and not taking people off. It's massive machlokas in medical halacha. But if you decapitate, this animal, maybe its legs are going to be kicking around for who knows how long, but that doesn't mean that they're alive. So can you start cutting up the animal while it's still twitching and take a limb and start barbecuing? So if you're already Jewish and the lachas halachos shchita, the answer is yeah. I don't care that the legs are twitching. It's halachically called shchita. That's a mitzvah given to the Jewish people. A goy cannot serve as a shochet. Jew can be a shochet. All right? So, but if you're a ben Noach, it might be a problem of aver minha tai, because the animal having some remnant of life to it may still be considered, in the context of a ben Noach's laws, would still be forbidden. And that's what Yosef said. Yosef says they're not behaving properly. They're acting as if they're already full-fledged Jews, and that this is all finished. How do you know? Maybe the 12 tribes will end up coming from me, or maybe not, or maybe we'll all be thrown in the trash, and one of us will produce the child that will eventually have. Hashem offered Moshe Rabbeinu to destroy all of Klal Yisrael and make Klal Yisrael out of him. It's possible. So that was Yosef saying, we're not refined enough yet. We're not finished enough yet. We're not able to claim our full development just yet. Okay? So that was their debate. But now take a look. What does Hashem say to Yaacov regarding Yosef and Binyamin on his way back to Eretz Yisrael? And going back to last week's Parsha. All right? So Hashem appears to Yaakov Avinu, right? And he tells him the following. V'yamar Elohim el Yaakov, kum alei Beisel, v'shev sham. This is after the Ma'aseh with Dinah. V'aseh sham mizbeach lekel hanira elecha. Make a mizbeach over there, as you promised, right? So he does that. Fine. And then Hashem appears to him again. V'yarol him el Yaakov od b'aram. Another message. Don't just go to Beit El. Again, Beit El, where he had the dream, where Har Moriah was pulled to be under that area, and we represented the whole of Eretz Yisrael. But again, the key entry point, Yosef, the territory of Yosef, the lands of Yosef. It's the key. Amar lo Elohim Shimcha Yaakov lo yikare od. Yaakov ki'im Yisrael yishmecha v'yikra shmo Yisrael. And then he gives him a bracha. V'yomer lo Elohim ani kel shakai prayer uveh goyu kal goyim yiyeh mimecha u'melachim michalatzecha yetzeyu. All of a sudden, he's talking about rearranging the posterity, the children, rearranging the shvatim. What kind of rearranging is going on over here? Okay. And goyu kal goyim. What is this referring to? So Rashi right away brings goyim is Menashe ve'Ephraim shatidim latzeis mi Yosef vehem b'minyan hashvatim. All of a sudden, Hashem appears to Yaakov and says, guess what? All right, you finished with Yosef. You finished with Esav. But here's the story. We need Esav's. The shadow of Esav always lurks. We need the person who will personify the good of Esav, the good that Esav was capable of, and that's going to come from the children of Rachel. So the first thing I'm telling you right now is that your son Yosef will have Ephraim and Menashe, and they together will be put into the Shvatim. Comes out a very fascinating thing. How many children does Rachel end up producing? 3. Yosef, which becomes Ephraim, Menashe, and Binyamin. Turns out that Rachel had 3 of the Shvatim. Remember, we said there's always going to be 12 Shvatim. There were 4 mothers. Now everything's balanced out. Now all of a sudden, Rachel takes her place, and Yosef is split into 2, just like Yaakov had to be split into 2, because Yosef is the one who's going to have Ephraim and Menashe. Ephraim, who stayed learning Torah with his grandfather Yaakov, and never left his side, and Menashe, who never left Mitzrayim, and stood at Yosef's side, and was the mashpir, and was the shemesh tzedakah, and Marpa b'Knafeha was going on with Yaakov, and Ephraim is weaning the children, teaching them Torah. So we need to plug in to, this is the triumph of Rachel, that she's restored to being a full-fledged one of the imos, better than the shvachos, right? Better, because she has 3. True that Leah has 6, but the other 2 shvachos only have 2 each. And therefore, what Yaakov was told, he says, guess what? Your inner struggle, your Gidanosh problem will be resolved in the splitting of Yosef into 2 tribes, and Milachim, and the kings that will come out from them. One is referring to Shaul and Ishbosheth, who came out from Binyamin, right? And they will have the opening crown in Eretz Yisrael, and that's what it means, Melachim, plural, Michalatzecha Yetzeyu. Goy ukal goyim means Shegoyim atidim banav leasos, keminyan hagoyim shem shivim umos. Interesting. They're going to be similar to the Shivim Umos. In other words, they will be the counterpart to the Shivim Umos. They will be the representative of those kochos. Now, it's important to note that in the end of days, as it was in Mitzrayim, the nations of the world will actually capitulate to the Jewish people, as they did when Yaakov was being buried, and Yosef put his crown on the coffin of his father Yaakov, and they allowed him to be buried. Even though Esav, here he comes again, shows up and tries to deny Yaakov burial in Eretz Yisrael. Because he says, it's mine. Mars Machpelah is mine. Again, he's contesting. He says, no, I am the Av. Esav comes back. In fact, if you go to Mars Machpelah today, you will see at the entrance something called Kever Esav. Esav is there. What is Esav doing there? I had a magnificent tour guide once who said to me, no, it was a mistake, because it was based on the medrash that the head of Esav, which was knocked off by Hushim ben Dan, rolled into Mars Machpelah and got buried with Yaakov. So it was so they have a Kever Yosef in Mars Machpelah. Yosef, he's buried in Shem. They said, no, it was a mistake. They meant Kever Esav. Esav in Arabic is Esav, and they got mixed up with Yusuf. So you'll go to the Mars Machpelah, you see Yaakov, and you'll see Yosef. What? No, it's not Yosef. It's Esav. And the events to play out will be that there'll be the recognition, as it was at that moment, the burial of Yaakov. The nations of the world took off their crowns and deferred to the crown of Yosef and allowed him to be buried there. Only Esav himself protested, and we took care of him. So this is what will happen, Lasid Lava. The turning point is when the nations of the world start to look at Israel as the Yosef. What does that mean? Shemesh tzedakah umarpeh beknafeha. He's going to provide wealth and he's going to provide protection. Interesting. What's the wealth that Israel's providing? Now, afar. It's all sand. It's called microchips. They're all made out of sand. Vayavek ishimo. The sands go to the heavens. It's a symbol of the children, but it's a symbol of Parnasa too. That microchips, just down the road here in Kiryat Gat, down the road from Beit Shemesh where we live, we're building $1 billion Intel facility to build microchips, which are silicon, which come out of sand. And what else? Kanafayim, wings, right? Marpeh beknafea. The kanaf is like a bird, flies, drones, missiles, airplanes, all the defense capabilities which Israel has developed, right? Iron Dome, like to cover the wing with your wings over the children, is like sheltering wings. You see it. And so let's understand and take note. The nations of the world, and especially in these last couple of months, maybe in these last couple of weeks, are starting to view Israel as a real Yosef. What does that mean? He's going to give us a lot of money. We're going to prosper with him. We're going to do deals with him. And we're going to be able to protect ourselves. He's going to teach us how to defend against these evil, deathly menaces like nuclear weapons, like all sorts of sort of arms and drones and suicide things. And yes, drones that are flying around New Jersey. Who knows what that's all about? Who will protect us? Israel will. And that's a very correct thing. When this incredible event, earth-shattering event happened, that Damascus fell, not into basically into ISIS's hands, but there were Druze on the other side of Mount Hermon, where Israel hasn't been allowed to be since Henry Kissinger restricted them. Let's not go into that. Now the Jews are on both sides of the Hermon, much more safe, much more secure. Okay? And guess what happened? I don't know if you followed this. 6 Druze villages come running to the Israelis and say, don't leave. Don't leave. But you're not Jewish. What do you want to do with Israel? No. Jews are very practical people. Where are we going to get the money? Or we're going to get the protection from you. You'll protect us from the crazy ISIS nicks that are running around Damascus. And they said, Beferish, you'll bring us technology and we'll be able to build and make money and get jobs and get training. It's happening. It's just so happening that this piece of Klal Yisrael, which is the responding to Esav's shadow, also became much, much clearer in the last week or so. The crowns of the world will be placed to be near the crown of Yosef, subservient to the crown of Yosef. Now, of course, you'll say, but the whole world hates Israel, and the whole world is the ICC and the United Nations and Ireland and whatever else. But those are people who have their own, imaginative views of what good and evil is. They want to run around and protect Hamas and free Palestine. And like the Pope, Yamach Shemo V'Zichro, who put a keffiyeh under baby Yoshka and celebrated with Abbas. This is evil. This is real evil. But it's also delusionary. It's the delusion. Everything about the Palestinians is a delusion. But the reality is, Yaacov is bound up with the mitzvah of Kira Noshe and the Tfilas Arvis. This is what gets us through the dark night. Shemesh Staka Marpeh Kofea. By the way, I have my own charitable organization called Kanfei Shemesh. And this is why I call it Kanfei Shemesh, because it's really to help people who have gone through difficult experiences. We have programs where we visit the soldiers in the hospitals and pick a cholim and provide support and do therapy and give chizuk classes and all kinds of things that are inspired by this idea. And Bez Hashem, this should be a continuing trend. Hashem told Yaakov, this is how it's going to go down. If you're worried about the Get Anasha, we're going to take the children of Rachel and deploy them 3 ways, and that will complete the foundation. That will cement Klal Yisrael and its ability to survive through all of its mortal challenges. Because Baruch Hu should give us the bracha that we should see quickly unfolding more and more hachna'ah, more and more acceptance of the role of the Jewish people as beneficiaries of the world. Okay, first Yosef HaTzadik, and then Melech HaMashiach. That's going to be a much, that's on the spiritual dimension. You follow me? That's going to be when they're going to ask us how to connect to Hashem. Right now they're asking us, how do I survive as a human being? How can I bring sanity and stability to my life, and to my family and my progeny? But that's just the beginning. It's just the beginning. And here in Eretz Yisrael, we have to hope and pray that the divisions and the hatreds, the sinas chinam, the mechiras Yosefs that happen here should dissipate. I have one more thing to share with you, but I'm going to have to save it for next week. Okay, we'll look at the actual sale of Yosef as we enter the Parshas this week of Yosef and his brothers. An eternal dilemma for the Jewish people. Eternal. And we'll see why. Have a wonderful week. We should be encouraged. Thank Hashem. Feel good. Be good. And let's look for more and more simanim. Like Baruch was shining down on us. Shemesh staka umarpeh bik'at.
Amen. Thank you.
It's